As long as you want. Senator Scott Jensen will be coming up here to speak. He was the author in the Senate of the Ballot Access Inclusiveness Bill, SF 752, on behalf of ourselves, the Green Party, the Independence Party, the Legal Marijuana Now Party, and the Grassroots Party. An issue where we all did come together and write a bill, and this man wrote it and introduced it, got bipartisan support. It did not get a hearing, however. So I'm going to just hand the mic off to Senator Scott Jensen from Chaska. Please give a round of applause to Senator Jensen.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
It is so good to be here. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me. I only have one piece of paper or note card, and that's this one here that Chris Holbrook gave me about 6 months ago. That's really all we need to talk about today. But let's just go back in time. It was last fall, I think, that Chris wrote a commentary to the paper talking about the need for more inclusiveness in Minnesota at the ballot. Third parties could help clear the way. Frankly, if all of us in this room hold on to a little naivete, it's probably the thought that legislators understand that ideas should fuel legislation. But that's really not the case. The fuel that drives so much of our behavior at the Capitol has far more to do with dollars and elections and the fickleness of voter blocks. And so we get distracted. We get elected, and it's only a few short weeks or months, and we're being told that we have to strategize for the next election, instead of saying, we've got 4 years to get some good work done. So Chris wrote a very compelling commentary. I asked my legislative assistant if she would please try to find a way to get in touch with him. Next thing I know, he was in my office and we had a meeting. And we started exploring common ground, talking about ideas. And it was clear that there was an intersection that wasn't going to be stopped. And so we did together, put together legislation. And it went maybe further than some people thought, but not nearly as far as I would have liked to hope. I remember getting a phone call from Chris. I had left him a message sort of apologizing that we hadn't done better. And he said, Doc, you got to lighten up. We made some headway. We'll be back. We're not giving up. It just struck me as funny that here was this guy sort of encouraging me, propping me up. It's supposed to be the other way around. But we are going to be back. We're going to do it again in 2020. And in 2020, with presidential politics on the docket, we might shake a few things up. Because if there's one thing that really ticks me off, it's when people tell me that I can't or shouldn't shake things up. If you go back about 14 months, that's when I really got in trouble the first time in the legislature. Well, maybe before that. When Governor Dayton had his collapse during the State of the State address, I was the guy who ran down and revived him. And quite a few people asked me why I didn't walk slower. Well, Governor Dayton's a fine man. He and I don't always agree on our politics, but I sure agree with his commitment to service, and I appreciate it. But getting back to 14 months ago, twice in the Republican caucus, we tried to initiate a discussion about what were we going to do about guns. Twice in our caucus, it was shot down. I was told, you are a freshman. We are not going to talk about guns. All that will do is lose us votes. We're going to talk about public safety, hardening the targets, and leave it at that. Well, to me, those were fighting words. And so I said, no, that's not going to happen. So when Matt Little came to me with 10 different bills on guns and says, Doc, could you do anything on any of these? And I looked at him, and 8 of them I thought were really less sincere than more just rhetoric. But 2 of them intrigued my interest. One, if I could just generalize, one got at the issue of straw man sales. And I don't think there's a whole lot of people on either side of the argument that think that someone should go out and buy a gun for someone who's prohibited from having one and selling it to the prohibited person and getting a premium in dollars. And that was the one. And the second one was a little more dicey because it had to do with background checks. Well, the biggest problem with our background checks today is not that we're not doing it universally, it's that it doesn't work, that we're not getting the data into the NICS system, and the BCA isn't connecting up with the NICS system. But I'm intrigued by the opportunity to increase the availability without registration, without any sneaky end run in towards of trying to get something going in terms of registering guns and then confiscating guns. I'm not interested in that at all. But if I choose to sell one of my handguns to someone I don't know very well, I maybe just met him at some shooting contest, I wouldn't mind the ability to tell him, if you go get a background check down at the sheriff's office, it's free, they'll keep no records, and have them just send me an email that you're not a prohibited person, because I don't want to unwittingly sell one of my guns to a prohibited person. And that was intriguing to me. So the bill didn't say that, but the bill got at universal background checks. So I signed on to that bill, and I told Matt Little at the time, I won't support either of these bills of yours in a committee or on the floor of the Senate. But we should work on these. These should be rewritten. You should talk to people like the gun owners, Rob Dorr, Brian Ghosh from the NRA. You should talk to both sides. You should find common ground and hammer it out. Well, he didn't do that. So I did. I met with Rob Dorr from the gun owners group. I met with Brian Ghosh and from the NRA and reached out to Chris Cox. And we have a bill now that the gun owners caucus, the NRA, both can agree with. And its sum total will basically be to provide a permissive pathway for those people who want to use a background check before they sell a gun, because they want to have the safe harbor that comes with having a background check. There's no mandatory aspect to it. There's no charge. It'll be done at the sheriff's office, and there'll be no registration kept. There'll be no records kept. The sheriff will never even know which gun is being entertained or whether a transaction ever takes place. But we took common ground and built from there. And we have actually some agreement. To me, that's what we need to be doing with marijuana. This is no time to put our head in the sand and ask, well, we're not going to have a discussion about marijuana because, heavens to Betsy, we might have people driving cars with THC in their system. Well, folks, guess what? We've got 15,000 people driving on highways with THC in their system. And they're a lot safer than having other things in their system, potentially a quarter pounder with cheese in their mouth while they're driving. There's lots of ways to be distracted or be, if you will, impaired. But the bottom line is, when it comes to marijuana, we've got to talk about it. We've got to ask ourselves, what's the relationship between the cannabis plant, hemp, and the cannabis plant, marijuana? What's the cutoff? What should we do in terms of impaired driving? Should we use a THC carboxy level of 2 or 3 nanograms per cc? What should we do? The only way we're going to know, the only way we're going to prepare for the future is to talk about it. Right now, we have many people in Minnesota getting real benefit from medical marijuana, and they're paying 5 times the cost they should. So what should we do? We should talk about it. What should we do? We should talk about it. We should find common ground and hammer it out from there. And that brings me to this position statement of the Libertarians. I ran as a Republican. I consider myself a Republican, but I also consider myself a Libertarian. When you look at the positions that a Libertarian and a Republican agree on, economic freedom, a robust national defense, respect for others' property rights, individual right to keep and bear arms, giving generously to those in need, and advancement based on ability. Those are solid intersections of agreement. Let's go to that area on this checklist where both the Libertarians and the Republicans don't agree with the liberal position. A government-regulated economy. Military intervention across the globe whenever someone sees fit. Using eminent domain for private gain. Banning guns. Funding government charities. And special rights for groups of people that politicians think they want to extend favors to. Those are the things that Republicans and Libertarians alike would disagree with. And let's go to the positions on the right side of the political spectrum that the Libertarians disagree with, but that the Republicans oftentimes embrace. Government-regulated morality. And it's one thing to say that you're a strong proponent of personal rights, but if you're a strong proponent of personal rights right up until the time you take someone's away, then you're really not a strong proponent of personal rights. Military adventurism. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, in America, we've made blunders, and we need to be more careful. When we extend our military arm outside of our borders, we better be clear as to what our objective is, why we're doing it, and America better be on board. A war on drugs. You know, I just love bumper sticker slogans in the world of politics. What does a war on drugs mean? Well, if you really look at it, you'd have to go back to 1970 and Richard Nixon. We'd just come off of Woodstock. We'd just come off of the 1960s. And so we had the Drug Act. And in that act, we were so short-sighted as a nation that we said that marijuana would be a Schedule I drug, meaning it had no use medicinally, and it couldn't be studied. And for half of a century, we've let that stand on the books. Well, frankly, a war on drugs should probably focus more on trying to make sure that people aren't dying from either too much, too little, or too consistently a drug. We've got people dying today because they can't get a hold of insulin. We've got people dying today because, for whatever reason, they have become addicted to opiates, and in times where their usage of the opiate drops off, they don't realize how quickly their tolerance falls off. And so when their supply is restored, whether it be from their physician or whatever, and they take their standard dose, that's enough to kill them in a lot of situations. So the war on drugs may sound good if you put it on a bumper sticker, but let's be a little thoughtful. A surveillance state. This country is going to lean into libertarian thought processes more than ever before. They are going to have to say, what are we going to do with drones and all the other ways that our government can watch us? Tax funding of faith-based charities. Frankly, when a political party decides to provide favors to faith-based charities, they better be very careful because that's a slippery slope. So those are the reasons why I was excited to be here. I consider Chris Holbrook a friend, and we've got work to do, and we're going to do it. We need to have ballot inclusion available. Our country will be better if the Libertarian Party is stronger. I'm absolutely convinced of it. So thank you.